Hello, my favorite little vampires. That's what I always say to all my students when I walk into the classroom and the lights are out. My name is Ms. Weaver, and I am here to help people become more effective communicators. And I do this by teaching my students essential written and oral communication skills, which allow them to reach their academic and professional goals while also strengthening their professional and personal relationships. So let's get to it. The attendance question of the day is, what is the name of your favorite or least favorite teacher, English or otherwise? My favorite instructor of all time was English professor Dr. Decker. My high school experience was not the greatest, to say the least, and I thought I was a horrible writer until I took his class. And he taught me all of the ins and outs of an academic essay, including structure, how to develop proper topic sentences, and how to write effective topics thesis statements. But that's going to be another lecture for another day. For now, I will be talking about using proper MLA format, 9th edition to be specific. So the MLA is short for the Modern Language Association. It's consisting of about 8 to 12,000 members who get together every 4 years or so and kind of develop the rules and regulations for the MLA format that is required for people to use when writing their essays. So they are currently in the 9th edition. I'm so nervous today. I'm so sorry. So today, the 9th edition is what is most commonly used. However, I always tell my students that teachers tend to use whatever MLA format they were trained. And so if you have an older teacher who maybe learned how to do MLA format edition 6th, they'll probably continue teaching their 6th edition. Regardless of what edition they're teaching you, if they tell you to write your name upside down backwards as a watermark across your page, do whatever they tell you to do because they're the ones that are going to be grading your paper. Regardless, I teach the MLA 9th edition. So yeah, let's get that going. So the most important thing to start with is knowing the difference between a header versus a heading, because we're going to be talking about both of those. So with a header, it's usually above this line. Usually you have to do like a double click on the page, it gets you up there. And then there's a header, and then there's the heading. Usually when I do this in my class, I have this whole little fun thing where I'm like, all right, what is MLA format? Tell me. And they usually list off things like, oh, it's Times New Roman, double spaced, size font 12. And then after that, they don't really know what else to say. Usually I kind of prompt them into saying things like, all right, well, how about a title? Or what about your course code? And of course, you always want to have your due date on there as well. And then I usually say, okay, well, where does all of this go? And a lot of students just kind of look at me and stare at me blankly, which is totally fine. I mean, a lot of people don't really know where to put things. So if you don't know where things go, that's absolutely appropriate. A lot of people don't. So at the top right-hand side where the header goes, that will be your last name and also the page number. It depends on what platform you're using as to how you get up there. You can go to insert header or maybe just double click on it and insert page number. However you get to it, it's different on different platforms. Every platform has like 6 different ways of getting to the same thing. So the main things that you're looking for is insert page number. And then once you get up there, you can type in your last name. So the next thing you want on your page is your name, right? Not just your last name, but your full name. Let's say your name is Sam Smith. After that, you would want to include your professor's name. So for me, it could be, Ms. Weaver. Some people will use my full name with Bobby Weaver. They usually spell it wrong, but that's okay. But however you put the professor's name up there, usually the best way to figure out what they want to be called is however they sign off on their emails. That's usually a really good indicator of how to write their name on your paper. The next thing you want is your course code. Now with your course code, that could change depending on what you're doing. So for a lot of my TC3 classes, it would be ENGL for English. It might be 098, it might be 100, might be 101, or any kind of variation of that. But you also want to include the section number as well. So that might say something like, let's clean this up a little bit. So that might be English 204, for example. And then you want underscore and then the course code, which would be M01. A lot of teachers will say M01, but that's actually a 0. A lot of students don't think that that's super important, but it really is because it helps the teachers know which class section you are in, especially if maybe 2 years from now you want a reference letter and you email your teacher and you're like, oh, hey, I took your English 204 class like 3 years ago. Do you remember me? Probably not, but if you remember your section code, that helps the teacher kind of remember exactly what season it was in, whether it was in spring or fall, that kind of thing. Also, if with being an English professor, students have to turn in a lot of essays. And so if every student has to turn in 6 pages, let's say, for example, I have 10 students, that's 60 pages. Most students, classes, there's like 22 students. That's a whole lot of papers. So if they're not stapled and they don't have the last name and the page number on the top, and let's say I trip and I fall and all my papers scatter everywhere, it's going to be really, really hard for me to figure out what pages go to what essays if I don't have that identifying information on there. So in addition to the course code, you'd also want the due date. Now with the due date, I have so many different ways of students that say, how do you write the date? And usually I ask people like to kind of call out some things. They usually come up with things like, I don't know, what's today's date? Today is December 21st, 2025. I know that's going to be dated for some people eventually, someday, but for now, it's going to have to work. And then I say, okay, well, is this how you write? And they're like, yeah. And then other people are like, no, you have to have the day first, and then December, and then spell it all out, 2025. And then somebody else will usually be like, no, that's not how you do it. It has to be abbreviated with 21 DEC period 25. And then somebody else will be like, no, it's got to be 2025. And then somebody else will be like, wait, I thought it was always the month first. So it would actually be, like December 21st, 2025. We usually have about 10 different ways of things to write on here because there are a lot of different ways of writing the dates. To be honest with you, this one is the absolute best if maybe you're sending out, I don't know, a wedding invitation and you want to make very clear that people know what month it's in and what day it is, that having that 21st or that 23rd, having that additional little piece on there does help people not make mistakes and forget the wrong date or write it down incorrectly. So that is really good if you're doing invitations, but not for essays. So then I usually have students vote to say like, oh, I think it's this one or that one. They can have multiple votes, but really what it comes down to is it's this one here. Now, just to clear that up a little bit, be 21 December abbreviated 2025. And again, you always want to have the due date. So say you wrote a draft that was due on the 20th. So 20 December abbreviated 2025. And that's for the draft. That's totally appropriate. But then what if you have to make changes and then you have like a few days to submit that? And then maybe it's due on the 25th of December because your teacher is not super nice. You might have your essay being due on the 25th of December. 2025. So your draft was due on the 20th, but then you absolutely have to change that date in order to match the new due date for the final copy. All right. And then the next thing on our list would actually be the title. I usually do this funny little thing where I'm like, oh, does the title go here? Does it go up here, over here, down here? Oh, long story short, it goes right here in the middle, underneath the date, not on the same line. And then you want to make sure that's centered. Now, one thing I see a lot of students do is they just do space, 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 space. You don't want to do that. All right, it's so much easier if you just kind of go up to the ribbon at the top with whatever platform you're using. And there's usually like lines where it's like this, which is justified. Then there's lines like this, lines like this, and lines like this. So to have it centered, it looks like that one. Okay. After that, you hit enter, and it brings you down to where you can start writing your essay. Now, before you actually start writing your essay, though, you want to make sure that you do a tab indent. Tab. Now, it's only on the first line. Another thing that you want to double check is to make sure that that tab indent is only at 0.5. You might not think that teachers can really see a difference between 0.25 and 0.5 and 0.1, and we can, especially if you're looking at 100 different essays. Like the smallest little difference is absolutely visible. Which brings me to the Times New Roman. So you can usually use Times New Roman or Arial font. Either one is fine, but most teachers prefer that Times New Roman. All of this needs to be the Times New Roman. Now, if you were to highlight everything and change it to Times New Roman, size font 12, this header section will not be included into that. So you need to make sure that you go into there and change that formatting font as well. Now with double spaced, I didn't realize this was an issue until I kind of kept telling a few students like, hey, you need to double space it. Why aren't you double spacing it? Hey, I left you a comment for double spacing. I noticed that you haven't done that yet. What's going on? And I kind of finally realized what they were doing is every time I said, I want double space, they thought after they wrote their sentence and they had a period, they would have to do space, space before they started writing again. And I was like, oh, no. Double space means that when you have a bunch of lines on your paper, you basically skip a line. So it looks more like that. Boom. And that's double spaced. Again, that's not something that you would do like enter, enter. You would go up into this ribbon area, and usually where it has like a paragraph formatting, you would just click on that and make sure you click double spaced, which would be 2.0. All right. And I do meet with students one-on-one if they are absolutely struggling with this. Maybe they need extra handout or some instruction on how to do these specific things on the platform that they are using, whether they're using Microsoft Word Online, Google Docs. All of those different things have different ways of doing the same stuff. So if that's something that you need help with, please do contact me and I can help you out with that. But otherwise, this is a really good start. Okay, so what else do we have here? So with the title, make sure that it is the same font as everything else. Times New Roman, size font 12. You want to make sure that the first letter is capitalized and any proper title things that are needing to be capitalized. So if you have, cat in the hat, notice that the C is capitalized and the H is capitalized, but the I and the T are not. So if you ever have any questions about whether or not something should be capitalized in the title, search it, Google it. Be like, do you capitalize the T and the in a title? The internet will help you with that. There are some rules as to how and why you would or would not capitalize letters, but honestly, it's really super confusing, and it's usually best to just kind of search it to figure out if it has to be capitalized or not. And the next thing is, again, make sure it's Times New Roman, size font 12. That means not bold, not underline, not size font 16. It's going to be the same exact font as everything else. All right. The next thing you want to do is, after you have your entire essay typed up, make sure you highlight the whole thing and change it to font color black. The reason is a lot of times when you're using outside sources, and maybe you might copy and paste something from like a website that you saw, what happens is when you copy and paste, sometimes it changes the font color to a really, really dark gray. And you as a student, as you're writing, you might not necessarily see that. But after you insert your quote here, and it changes the font color, all the font after that is going to be that dark gray as well. Again, on your end, you might not be able to see it, but on my end as an instructor, I would be able to see it because I stare at black ink all day. So let's see, what else do we have? Oh, also when you like copy and paste, sometimes what will end up happening is that it will turn on this like highlight. It's like a gray highlight or something. So you just want to make sure that you get rid of any kind of highlights that there are from the sources that you copy. All right, so getting into sources. Anytime you use a source, you need to make sure that you are citing it, right? In-text citations is essentially giving credit where credit is due. If it was not your original thought, you need to make sure that you say who gave you that information, like where did you get it from? Anything that you didn't already know before, you need to include that in there. So let's see here. What can I get rid of? I can get rid of this stuff here. So whenever you have a quote, you want to make sure that you introduce the author. You might also include the type of the source and the title or the publication date at the very first time that you mention a news source. But you always want to make sure that you have somewhere in there the name of the author. So let's say it was, I don't know, Dick Kane. Why not? So Dick Kane says this quote that you have. So you want to make sure that you say something like, according to Dick Kane, blah, 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 blah. And then you want to follow it up with the page number that you got the information from. Now, if you found the information from a website that doesn't have page numbers, there are certain ways of still having that page number, even if it doesn't have a page number. That's something I can always explain to you. If you have questions about it, feel free to reach out to me. You would only use the paragraph numbers if it's like super short. Like if it's only a one-page blog and that only has like 4 paragraphs, you might just do paragraph number, in which case you would just write, let's say it's paragraph 4, you would only have 4. A lot of times I have seen people write page 7 or para 4. You don't need to do that. All you need is the number. All right. All right, so after the very first time that you have mentioned it, so the very first time you use a quote by Dick Kane, you need to say according to Dick Kane or something along those lines. But after that, you only need the author's last name. That's it, just the last name every time you use it thereafter. You can include the author's credentials like PhD or CEO or whatever, but it's not really necessary unless you want to explain why we can trust this source. But it's not something that's required for the MLA format. It does help if you're kind of short on the word count and you want to give some kind of background to who the author is and why you're using them. That's totally fine. If there's many authors, for example, if there's 2 authors or more, you want to say Kane and not good with names today. Katana, you want to be in here? So Katana. We're going to pretend that that's Katana's last name. All right, so we have Kane and Katana. You do not use the ampersand. So not that. You want to spell it out. If there's more than 2 authors, you would just say Kane et period space all, al period. So Kane et al. And that's if there's 3 or more authors. All right. Now, I do always tell people, make sure there's some kind of introductory phrase that leads into the quote, whether it's according to Kane or research shows or sources indicate, authors suggest, anything that you want to use. You want to make sure that you lead into the quote, so you never start a sentence with a quotation mark. All right, so the times that you would need to use an in-text citation is if you ever use any quotes, paraphrases, or even a summary. So quote is when you're using it word for word, verbatim. Even if they spell something wrong, you should type it exactly as you see it. Paraphrase is like if they have an entire, paragraph that you want to say something about it in your paper, you would need to make sure that you have a citation after everything that you paraphrase. And then with a summary, that's like if you wanted to use an entire book that you wanted to kind of summarize into a few sentences, you will still need to include that in-text citation. Hi, Katana. All right, what else do we have? So yeah, a lot of times people are like, well, what about the year? I thought we had to use the year. That is actually APA format. So let me show you the difference between APA and MLA as far as the in-text citation goes. So let's say Colby. So according to Colby, blah, 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 on page 7, right? That would be MLA. However, with APA, you would say Colby, and then you would have the year. So let's say 1986, and then blah, 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 period. Do notice for the MLA citation, the period does not go inside of the quotation. It goes after the page number. Super important. I see a lot of students have that period inside. You just want to make sure it's only on the outside there. So going back to APA, you have the, if you have the author's name inside of the sentence, you have the year. Let me actually bounce that down a little bit. Colby, 1986, blah, blah, blah. So there's 2 primary ways of doing citations. You can have the author's name at the beginning with the page number at the end, but the other way of doing it is if you don't have the author's name in the beginning, you just say, according to research, like studies show, blah, 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 blah. And then you don't have the author's name at the beginning, you do need it at the end. So it'd be Colby 7. So those are the 2 primary ways of showing a MLA citation. And then with APA, just like before, with the name at the beginning, with the year, with the quotation marks. The other way of doing it is if you do not have the author's name, you have the quote, and then at the end, then you have Colby with the year. Again, not the page number, but the year that it was published. All right, and if you have any questions about that, reach out to me. I'd be happy to explain it further. It is something that can be a little confusing for a lot of students. All right. Okay, now if you were to be doing public speaking and you aren't writing this out, how exactly would you say that information? Well, it's kind of difficult actually, because you can't just show people this information. It wouldn't make sense to say, oh, on page 7. By the way, that is something that I see a lot of students do. They say, according to Colby, on page 7, she states, no, you just want to have 7 at the end. You don't need to say on page 7 or in paragraph 2. That just doesn't really make sense. But if it's for public speaking, you need to have not only the name of the author, but also the title of the publication and the publication type, whether it's a study or an article or a blog, and then also the source type, like where you got the information from. So that is a lot of information. Sorry, publication date, I had a mistake on my notes. So you need to have the publication date, the source type, as in whether it's a study or research or blog, and then also the name of the author and the title. And you actually have to say that all out. So you'd have to be like, according to the article published in 1986 by the author Anita Colby, she states, and then you have all of that information, right? Oh, and then also the title. Sorry. Okay, so that's all that is only how to do in-text citations. So within your paper, anytime you use a quote, a paraphrase, or a summary, you need to have that information there. But you also need to have a works cited page, which is an entirely separate page from the essay itself. So even if I had a whole nother page, so here's page 1, and then here's page 2, and I only have like 2 lines on that second page, I would still need to insert a page break. In order to go on to a third page to have the works cited. All right. I have seen a lot of students that just hit enter, 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 enter. And then what happens is they change information within their essay, which makes this line go up and down. Maybe it adds another line there, and then this is going to bounce down. Maybe they take a few lines out, and then this ends up like way up here. So you want to make sure that you do insert page break, and so it goes onto a separate page, and no matter what you do to the end of your essay, that is always going to be on the next page. Even if you continue to go all the way down, it'll bounce over onto a 4th page. Okay, so double check that you make sure you do that appropriately, because otherwise it just goes all over the place. All right, so, do I want to do this? So normally I would have my students write on the board. I would hand out an article, and I would ask everyone to break up into groups, and then I would have everyone kind of get into their groups and try to write down how they think they would cite something. But I'm just going to show it to you guys. It's a little harder to get into groups when you're online. All right, so what you would want is you want to have the title, the author, the publisher, publication date, as a bare minimum, and also maybe the page numbers. So the article that I hand out to everyone for MLA, what that would look like is Colby, Anita, Y period, in quotation marks, the title, writing instruction in the 2-year forgot my caps, 2-year college, period, end quotation marks. The publisher would be in italics. So Eric, comma, and then the page number. So for MLA, it'd be PP 2 through 6. All right, so notice that as I'm doing this, I keep looking back at my computer for my class notes. I have used the same article for the past 12 semesters, so past like 6 years at least, and I'm still double checking the citation. And the reason is because every teeny tiny little bit of it matters. Even that comma here, that period here, having those quotation marks, having the italics, having that comma, make sure you have PP dot, and even the page numbers, like all of that is super important. Even, making sure that I have the capitalizations correct. I even missed something right there. So you want to make sure that you are double checking and even triple checking all of your sources, because every little bit matters. Now let me show you the difference between the MLA citation for the works cited page. This is works cited versus the APA format. So with APA format, it's not called a works cited page. It is called a citations page. All right. And again, just like with the title, that would be at the top in the center. Times New Roman, size font 12, no bold, no underline, same stuff, okay? Now with the APA for the citation page, notice I call it a works cited page and a citations page, but you would not have that as your title. It only says citation or works cited. I can't fit that all in there, but you get the idea. So you don't say page, that's what it's called, but you don't have page on the title. All right, so for the APA, it would be Colby A.Y. So right there, we can already see a difference. With MLA, you would include the author's full first name, whereas in APA, it's only the author's initials. And then we have the year, 1986, period, then the title, and some of you might be like ready to write in the comments already. Be like, oh, you forgot the capitalizations. No, I didn't actually, because with APA, the very first letter and after any colons would be capitalized. Otherwise, it's only that one first letter. Everything else is lowercase, okay? And then we have the period after the title, and then Eric. That one is not in italics. Comma, and if there were an issue number or volume number, that's where we would have it in there. Even those have their own little intricacies, and so I won't go into it in detail here. There's already enough information to digest as it is, but if you do have any questions as how to do the volume number or the italics, do let me know, and I will be happy to help you out with that. But otherwise, that's it. Oh, and then the page number. So here you don't have PP, it's just the page number and then the period. So just by looking at these minor differences, we can see that there is a difference between the MLA and the APA. Either way though, they do use what's called a hanging indent. Again, it's one of those things I'm not going to show you how to do it on a computer, primarily because there's literally 6 different ways of getting to it. It also really depends on which program that you're using. But the key term that you're looking for is hanging indent. What that does is it makes the very first line over this way, and then the following lines tabbed over, but not just like by hitting tab on your keyboard, but actually by having it set up in that way. So when you go up to the paragraph formatting, that's usually where it is. The same place where you would do the double spaced, that's where you would locate the hanging indent. All right. The last few things to add into here is make sure that they are in fact in alphabetical order, ABC order, just to make it a little easier for people to read through your information, and because that's proper MLA format. One last thing is that with the citation page or the works cited page, it's not called citation page. Yeah, it works. It's references. Sorry about that. References. As you can tell, I have been using MLA for a very long time. But yes, it is called the references for the APA format. Yes, back to what I was saying though, all of this would be in single spaced, not double spaced. All right, with that, I have now told you how to do the in-text citations along with the works cited and the reference pages. Do keep in mind that, again, anytime you use outside information, you have to do it in that way, because if you don't use citations for the information that you have, you can actually get hit with plagiarism. And if you do it often enough, you can actually get kicked out of school or get into some serious trouble. There are lots of examples throughout history of people like Nobel Peace Prize winners who have to turn in their award because they plagiarized something, even unknowingly. You can still get into trouble for that. So anytime you use information from an outside source, make sure you cite it. And on that note, I think we're all done for today. So have a great day, everyone, and I will see you all soon.